Hey there everybody, it's Ashley. Welcome back to another installment of Lovely Layering with Ashley. Today I'm going to dive into another way that you can stretch your stamps, and I'm going to be creating a layered background pattern using just one stamp, and I'm also going to be creating sort of this outer wreath of florals around my card front. I'm doing this all with the singular stamp in the brand new Paint a Flower set, and this is Anemone. I believe I'm saying that correctly. I had to look it up, but that's the pronunciation I got, so I do apologize if it is not correct. However, you can see that there is this really beautiful bouquet of flowers in this set. What I'm going to do first is stamp this bouquet twice on a piece of masking paper. And this masking paper that I have is basically just really low tack or removable sticker paper, so it works really well for large images like this. I also want to apologize. I am slightly sick. I have a little bit of a sore throat, nothing to worry about, but if you notice that my voice is a little different than it normally is, that is why. So I'm using my MISTI to go ahead and stamp this image, and then I'm going to rotate my masking paper 180 degrees so that I can get a second image stamped on there. And then I'm just going to take a pair of scissors and make sure that I get into all the little nooks and crannies as I am fussy cutting this out. Now, the Paint a Flowers don't have coordinating dies, but I wouldn't use a coordinating die to cut out a masking piece anyway, because it does leave a little bit of a border, and when you're masking you want to make sure that you get as close to the edge as possible, and this will just allow for less gaps in between images where there shouldn't be any gaps. So this is what I get at the end, and you can see that there are a little bit of spaces in between where the flowers meet. I'm not going to worry too much about that. I don't think it's going to be a problem, but if you really wanted to get in there and make sure that you got every single space cut out, you could absolutely use an X-Acto knife or a craft knife for that. I'm going to start creating my background pattern now by stamping this image several times onto my card front. When doing this technique, a rule of thumb that I always like to follow is to make sure that my stamp hangs off of the corner or the edge. It just looks a little bit more cohesive that way, and it's a little more aesthetically pleasing when the entire card front is filled and it looks like it's sort of hanging off of the edges there. Before I put my masking paper on, I'm just going to hit it with my heat gun really quickly. I just want to make sure that the ink is completely dried before I basically put a sticker over the top. So I'm going to just match up the edges here, and because I fussy cut it out, it's not going to be perfect. One piece may be a little bit too big, one might be a little bit cut into the flower or the leaf, but it really is not going to make that big of a difference once I start coloring all this in. So I just match it up to the lines as best as I can, and it's going to work just fine. One thing that I really was hoping that I could do was just use the stamp in the same exact spot on my MISTI. I realized pretty quickly that that wasn't going to be an option for this size stamp. I would definitely say to try it out, because a lot of times stamps will be able to stay in the same place on the MISTI, so you don't have to keep replacing the stamp, taking it off of the MISTI and then figuring out where you'd like it on your cardstock. But for this particular size and this particular stamp, that just wasn't going to work out for me. So of course you'll see that I do end up removing the stamp from the MISTI and then figuring out where I'd like it on my cardstock before I place it on and then ink it up again. I want to just also remind you to make sure to clean your stamp in between each of these. You don't want it all over your hands, and even more so for me anyway, I don't want it all over my card front, any smudges or anything like that. You also may have noticed that I only actually needed 2 pieces of masking paper over these images. I stamped it 4 times, but because only 2 of the images were actually being stamped over, I only needed those 2 pieces that I cut out in the beginning. So now that I have this really beautiful background image, you might be thinking this looks crazy. It's really busy and you can't see all the details. and you would be almost right. It is a little bit tough to figure out where every single piece is, which is why I like to break it down in groups. It makes it a lot easier for me. So I've taken out some of my artist markers from Altenew, and I've taken out some green colors, and I've decided that I'm going to focus on coloring just the leaves at first. It's sort of reminiscent of like an I Spy book where you have to sort of go around the page and find all of the leaf images so that I can color that in first, and then I'm left with just the flowers to color in. Now, obviously, you could break this down any way that you'd like. If you think that you'd rather do it in quarters, you could just break it down into quarters of your card. You could do flowers first and then leaves. I just happen to find it easier if I'm coloring in one type of image, so all of the leaves and they're all green. That will make the other images stand out a lot more, like the flowers and the buds. For my flower colors, I've decided to use some purple colors from the artist marker sets from Altenew, and all of the individual shades are listed in the description if you're interested. So I've decided on this really nice deep purple, and then I'm going to switch gears and do a really clean and nice pastel pink color for the other flowers, which you can see here. I've decided on a yellow center for the purple flowers and then a darker brown center for the pink flowers. I just feel like this always kind of makes more sense to me if a darker flower has a lighter center and a lighter flower has a darker center. It just is a little bit more pleasing to the eye to me. Moving on now to the sentiment, I wanted to keep it nice and bold in the center of this busy background. So I've decided on using the Fancy For You die. And I thought that it would be really pretty if this die was cut out of a gold piece of cardstock, and I thought that it would be really fun to bring in some embossing powder, and I've decided to use gold crisp embossing powder, also from Altenew. Now, how do I make this my DIY cardstock with embossing powder is that I just take an embossing ink, I go ahead and rub it all over a piece of cardstock. I'll then put a piece of sort of scrap paper down where I place this on top and then pour my embossing powder all over it, hit it with my heat gun, and then I've got my own gold cardstock. And I didn't have to sort of like rummage through all of my cardstock. I was able to make it quickly and easily, and also I get to use some of the other products that I have in my craft room, which is always a plus. So I've die cut that out now, so I have this really, really pretty shiny piece of gold die cut that says For You. And to make it a little bit thicker, I'm going to make it sort of like a chipboard piece. And to do that, I've taken the same die and die cut twice more just from white cardstock. Then I use some liquid adhesive to adhere the two pieces or the two die cuts together, and then just follow suit one more time to get that third die cut on there. And now we have a nice thicker piece of die cut. Once I went ahead and put that on my card front, I realized that it really wasn't standing out enough. You couldn't see enough of it. It wasn't easy enough to read, but I still wanted that gold to show through. So what I did was just cut the die out one more time from black cardstock and then offset it when I adhered it so that you could still see that gold peeking through the die in the background. I really like the way that this background pattern came out. With just some really simple masking, I was able to create my own background stamp pretty much, and I just think it turned out really nice, especially with the For You die right there in bold black and gold on top of the card front. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to still create several images out of this one stamp, but this time I'm doing a wreath pattern sort of all around the edge of my cardstock. Now this paper is the new watercolor paper from Altenew, and this is the pre-cut package. So this one is cut to an A2 size, which is really nice. They also have 9x12 paper if you're looking for something a little bit bigger or something that you can cut down to different sizes. Since I've decided to use a no-line watercoloring technique for this card, I'm using Butternut ink, which is a really light yellow ink, to stamp my images, and that's why you can barely see it at all. When it's in person, it's easier to see, but on camera it's really tough, so I do apologize for that. I'm just going to go really quickly through my watercoloring on a few of these leaves just to show you that I use the same basic process as the last technique, and I go and do all of my leaves first and then my flowers. And of course, because I love it so much, I'm using the Artist Watercolor 24 pan set from Altenew. The formula is so creamy and it can go to so transparent. I just can't recommend this palette enough. You can see that I used the same For You die here in the center, only this time I used it from some gold glitter cardstock and added in some satin gold sequins and called it done. I hope you've enjoyed the video and gotten some ideas on how you can create your own patterns using your floral stamps. Thank you so much for watching. As always, links to all of the products are in the description. Thanks so much. I'll see you soon.